talk about what the journalist who reported on the Gisele Pelicot trial went through. And also just keep in mind what goes into these stories that go out into the world that change the world, and how much we need journalists and storytellers, artists, writers, the people who talk about culture and history and what's happening and what happened and where do we go from here. Because the weight of this story on these journalists, the trauma of these journalists in that room, I want to give a whole video dedicated to what they had to go through to give us this life-changing story, world-changing story. Now, again, this may change nothing. It may change literally nothing now, today, or in the next 10 years. But what it does is it changes minds. It changes thinking. It changes the way we can't do this much longer, because this case was so horrifying. It shook a lot of us out of our delusion. Maybe nothing will change legally, but it's in here forever. And it literally changed my life and how I saw a lot of my own stories here in France and in my life in general. It gave me courage. It gave me hope. It also made me really hopeless and angry, and really believing that there's nowhere to go from here. It did all these things at the same time. That's part of what truth is all about. The truth will set you free, but first it'll ruin your day, your week, your month, your year, your decade. The truth is so hard. It's so hard to face. But if we don't face it, we will never heal all this stuff. We'll never get out of this. So without further ado, let's jump into this story. But first, please follow my Patreon if you can afford to, or even if you can't join a tier that's paid. The only way I'm able to do this work is mostly because of Patreon at this point, because TikTok stopped paying me basically with it a year ago, and now YouTube is kind of trending that way. So I'm really scared I won't be able to continue to do this work. So please, if you can afford to, and you appreciate what I add to your life and the stories I tell and what I do to tell those stories, and you can afford it, I really appreciate that. And again, if you can't, join the free level, so at least you get a notification about what I do, and so that you can go watch the video and just know what I'm doing, because it's hard for me to access y'all. The algorithms determine my entire life at this point when it comes to work. Anyway, so I wanted to share this because I'm pretty sure that no one outside of France is reading these articles. And also keep in mind, this was all translated into English through, Google Translate. So this is not going to be absolutely correct on everything. This is one of the journalists who has been, there's several I've been following for a while. And every day they are in there blasting this information out to us. And after reading this article, I had chills. I was so grateful that they are there. And they were willing to put themselves through this. As y'all know, I had to take a break. My doctor ordered me to stop reading this story. It's been going on for months. It was making me physically ill. So I'd take breaks, come back to it, talk about it. I had to go back and forth taking breaks. So I don't know how they sat in that room, but this title gives you chilling statements, unbearable videos at the Maison, a suffocating atmosphere for 3.5 months. Now, the point of me doing this video is not just to honor them and appreciate them, but just to appreciate journalism. Now, we know that a lot of it is super messed up and the media turns everything, and especially as Bezos and all these forkers keep buying out, the billionaires keep buying out, that it is hard to find news that doesn't have a very patriarchal or, colonial slant, or whatever. All of the people with power are they have the ultimate authority over editing. But that doesn't mean that nothing in the news is true. The whole fake news thing that Trump created really messed us up, and there's news desert. But if you take nothing else from this, please, as hard as it is to see this, the strength and the courage and the commitment to truth and storytelling and sharing with us things that we need to know to keep ourselves safe, to be motivated to change our own behavior, to change things in our own lives that may be enabling this crap, or whatever. That's what I try to take from this. As hard as this is to follow, I try to be inspired by these journalists. I also try to see that no matter how hard it is, what I'm learning it is a necessary part of healing. The acknowledging the truth, seeing the truth, sitting with it, and being devastated by it is the foundation of change. Without that necessary part, grief, anger, all that stuff, we can't move forward. So as hard as this is, it's the groundwork. It is the thing that has to happen for us to get out of this. That's how I try to look at it, because that's how it's worked in my personal life. I can't get past something I won't sit with, look at, and really painfully experience in here. I have to go through that process first. So let's get into it. She talks about how all these journalists are sitting there, they're all piled in. And when on the first day, when all of the men came in, just seeing all these defendants, some wore cast dark glances at the press. Others wanted to appear friendly. And they're asking themselves, which one's the fireman? Which one's the nurse? The journalist? There are 32 of them appearing free while 18 are squeezed into the box, right? Because some of them were already being held in jail and other ones weren't. She also noticed that again, like I said in the video before, the only thing that connected all of these people, all of these 51 defendants, was their gender. There's receding hairlines, look at this. We noticed youthful features, receding hairlines, a crutch, several pairs of sneakers, t-shirts, a few casual shirts. They were so different, y'all. They were across socioeconomic statuses, across religion, across race, across even sexual orientation. It was one of the most diverse groups of people, and the only thing they had in common was their gender and violence against women. And then some of the other things they had in common were the violence that they had experienced. And again, before you dismiss this part, cycles of violence does not excuse what these men did, but this is why I'm telling y'all, if men don't deal with their trauma, they will inflict it on us. So, not always, but it goes somewhere. Same thing with me. Until I really dealt with my own trauma, I kept seeking it out. So, also talked about their first impression of Gisele. She had this clear, calm voice. My name is Gisele Pelicot, and she gave her blah, blah, blah. 72-year-old, the victim of 200 grapes that we know of. There's no telling what her husband was doing, not on camera. This speech was enough to terrify. But Gisele speaks in one go, calm and determined. The journalists type at high speed on the computer keyboard. They try to transcribe everything word for word. It is the beginning of a report of the hearings in real time via social network. And this is going to go on for 3.5 months. They are there almost every Monday through Friday, with some, exception, for 3.5 months. Words immediately leave a lasting impression. This is like her first speech. I was sacrificed on the altar of vice. They see me as a rag doll, a garbage bag. It is not for myself that I testify, but for all these women who suffer chemical submission. She also, later on would say she's doing this for her grandchildren. She's doing this for just, beyond chemical submission. And this sentence really, it really hit all of the journalists. She reminds us, before becoming a symbol of resilience, Gisele Pelicot was a woman who learned the unthinkable, right? Because by this time, people were like, oh my God, this lady, she's gonna open the da-da-da. But she reminds us, before we got here, I went through this. On November 2nd, 2020 at the police station, she says, at that moment, the trauma is so immense, I have but one desire, is to go home and take refuge with my little dog. And then very quickly, this testimony, it says his, but that's because they always translate it the wrong, whatever, is blasted in German and Spanish and, English. It's all over the globe. And this starts a 3.5 month super intense trial of the century here. They've never seen a trial, I don't believe, like this in France before. In terms of this much everyone talking about it, this much publicity, them in the courtroom. Some days people had to wait outside the courtroom from 7:30 a.m. to get a seat. Y'all, I told y'all I almost went down there. I wanted so bad to just be there, but I actually didn't want to take up a seat for the people who needed to be there, and I just didn't know if my body could handle it. So then she goes on to talk about who is actually the local press and the AFP have their seats reserved. And then others like the Daily Mail tried to squeeze in, of course. Everyone wanted to avoid the broadcast room, which did not allow them to capture the atmosphere in the court. Which again, even though we're just reading the word, they had to sit with the energy. Imagine being in a courtroom with 51 men who had done this to her. And then also like people there supporting, I can't imagine being in the energy of that courtroom. The atmosphere is often stifling. You have to confront the sordid in its smallest detail. She talks about the director of investigation describes abject scenes recounting dozens of oral, anal penetrations in the mind. In the middle of the litany, Caroline Darian, who's the daughter, leaves the room visibly upset. What to write in the reports? What level of detail to review? At what point do we risk falling into voyeurism? And this is a real, concern. Like, Giselle's putting herself through all this and making everybody go through this to watch this, to see. So she's not alone in the room with these men, and so that everyone can see what they did. She fought to have those videos shown. And yet this is like a real concern of journalists, is like, are we exploiting her by saying too much? You know what I mean? Like, it's really hard as a writer, journalist, a storyteller to decide what to tell and what not to tell, what to go into great detail over, what to just summarize. Like, these are very intentional choices, and they're very important choices. Afternoon, a few journalists take a break to breathe on the steps of the courthouse before forcing themselves to watch the first images. They talk about the this dude and me, these are like the titles of the videos. We see Dominique Pelicot forcing his unconscious wife to perform. Afterwards, every week, the same images come back. Men smiling at the camera, men in socks, hesitant men, and men who all overall seem very confident, like this accused miming the V for victory in the act. Ugh. I can't, it feels like secondhand experience of rape. Imagine what the statistics are on SA. How many of those journalists in that room have been SA'd, having to watch this and having to sit in the same room with the very men who did all of this? Nausea overwhelms the audience during the broadcast of a video showing a brief awakening of Gisele Pelicot while she is attacked by her ex-husband alone this time. Ouch, leave me, you're hurting me there, she mumbles before sinking back into lethargy. These videos still haunt this courtroom and are at the heart of this case, if not the case itself. It emphasizes her attorney. I really, really respect her attorneys and what they did during this case. But imagine being in that courtroom. They were all wanting to throw up, y'all. And they went back day after day and sat there. And I think, honestly, part of it is like, if Giselle's going to sit through this, we're going to sit here next to her. But holy cow. The evidence is there. Massive, irrefutable. How do the accused deal with it? Some blame their actions on their addiction, like Jerome. Or Cedric D., who gives a staggering testimony. 4 days earlier, his 3 ex-partners recounted the ordeal he had put them through. And I'm going to actually go through that at the end of this because I don't know. I don't know if you can handle it, but I do think it's important. But I want to get through the journalist experience first. From his box, this 50-year-old, this dude who just did unthinkables, admits to having tried to chemically subdue one of them with the complicity of Dominique Pelicot. I think that in terms of deviance, I have broken quite a few records. He observes, acknowledging having possessed and manufactured a plethora of child. He admits to having recognized himself in the portrait of Dominique Pelicot, painted by this expert. I wondered if they were talking about me or if they were talking about him. Like, whatever. I'm going to go into this later on. I mean, one of the most frightening things about this trial is that these are all men living around the area, and there's no profile other than the fact that they are all men. And most of them had experienced some level of violence, but honestly, it's not all that unusual. The speech of this particularly verbose defendant contrasts with that of many others. Many of them appeared introverted, as Charlie A., who was 22 when he went to Mazan for the first time, but he went 6 times. And for him, probably because he's young, each question of the court seems to paralyze him. And then she goes in to talk about how the path of the accused was marked by addictions and violence. So this is something I want, other than gender. Most of these men had some sort of addiction issue, which is why I am telling you, if you are dating, like, it is so dangerous to be involved with men who have addiction at any kind, because if they have any addictions, then you will be sacrificed on the altar of their addiction. So if it is gambling, that your money is you're going to be screwed financially. If it is, you're going to be screwed financially probably with any addiction. But what I'm telling you is that if anyone you're dating or married to or whatever is showing serious signs of addiction, first of all, a lot of times there's trauma they're not dealing with, and so they're using escapism to avoid the trauma, but that or the violence or whatever went on in their life. And if they never deal with it, you will deal with it. Whatever men or people in general won't deal with, the people closest to them will deal with it. And as I've said plenty of times, it's not that women don't cause a lot of harm with addictions. Of course they do. But men's addictions, usually women pay the price of men's addictions. Men's addictions always affect women and children or anybody they have power over way more than it does on them, other than maybe literally taking their life. But they take our lives all the time with their addiction. Behind a car, with violence, all kinds of stuff. I am telling you, do not take addictions. Take them seriously. Take them very seriously. Because that is one of the only common denominators of most of these men, with some sort of addiction or addictive escapist behavior. Not a week goes by without the accused talking about their troubled childhoods, often marked by absent fathers. And that doesn't mean that it's not blaming it on single mom. What it usually means is, at the very least, a lot of these had absent father, and then oftentimes ended up getting, in groups of men, or, maybe a stepfather or an uncle, but it's usually another man in their life that, because there was, that's the thing, is predators oftentimes target children who don't have a parent who can protect them, or a parent who isn't able or willing to protect them. Anyway, only one comes to testify. Only one dad comes to testify for any of them. Several mothers come, though, because again, women, because of our conditioning, will always cape for these men who've done harm to other women or just to anybody. This is why we have to decenter men, because the people who went to bat and testify for most of these men were women. The same way Gisele defended and protected her own husband. She was dropping off clothes to that man in prison. Before she really sat with the truth and her anger, she was still taking care of him. And like I've said in another video, and I'm probably going to talk about soon, but I'm not quite ready yet because it's too upsetting and too personal, is the whole piece, because she still can't handle what he did to her daughter. She's still struggling with that. Anyway, many partners came to, most often in denial. Rare are those who have radically broken up with their partner. So even being accused of this didn't make most of the partners leave them. A week goes by without the mention of addiction, mainly to alcohol. And this is France. Alcohol is a part of the culture here. And I don't think that's necessarily bad, like wine and stuff, but it is so normalized here. It's really hard to not drink. I get offered wine every single day here. I don't drink. I haven't drank in 20 years, but I'm not an alcoholic, thank God. So I'm not tempted on a daily basis to just have a drink. Why not? Here, it's like really big deal if you don't ever drink. She also just mentions a few of the crazy stories. Chaotic journeys remain in the memory. Jean-Pierre, his father, brought strangers to the family home to grape his drunk wife. That's right. This man, his father, brought strangers to the family home when he was a child to grape his wife. Of Fabian, whew, I've been reading these individual cases for weeks. Fabian who lived on the streets for 7 years after suffered physical and mental violence in foster homes, right? There's so much violence just in that experience. And then Roman, there was like a guy who literally his dad would wait outside of his school with a meat cleaver. Like, again, I'm not using this to justify what these men did. What I am saying is that patriarchal violence is, women are not the only people who suffer from patriarchal violence. It is a cycle of violence, and the very victims of this violence go on sometimes to complete the cycle of violence by doing the exact same thing to their children or strangers or their wives or whatever. Doesn't mean that they should not have a punishment or, justice, but we can't ignore that this is a cycle we're stuck in. About a quarter of the men who parade behind the microphone claim to have expressed SA during their childhood. I am not saying some of these men wouldn't lie or didn't lie. And I don't want people to think that just because you experience this means you're going to do it. But what I am saying is that a lot of the people who do it experienced it. This is one of the more disturbing parts, but of the entire trial. It's not even what they did, but the way they think of what they did. Rapists, most of the accused do not consider themselves that way. Oh, this sentence, y'all. A team spirit seems to animate some of them. Cross to the morning in a cafe before the hearings. Evening, they meet there to debrief. I think what she's getting at here is that they all were on the same team. Their tactics may have been different, but they were all on the same team, and the mentality was, I'm a victim. This isn't fair. I'm a victim. And they used different tactics. Some of them said, well, I did that thing, but I'm not a rapist. Or, okay, I am a rapist, but I'm sorry. But what else was I supposed to do with all this trauma? You know what I mean? But they all had a team spirit of this isn't fair. I'm the real victim here. I am not a rapist. I was set up, sums up one of them, feeling like so many others. He places all the responsibility on Dominique. The other dude dares to draw an analogy with the mustache man who manipulated 80 million people. Imagine going in your defense against being on camera, caught raping somebody, is being like, that man made me do it. And he is basically just like, sometimes outrageous pleadings, which was partly written during the hearing. Oh my God, using ChatGPT, the defense tries to atomize, I don't know how to say that word. Atomize Dominique Pelicot at all costs. He is presented as the ogre of Maison, the monster, the paraphilic. I don't know what that means. The great Machiavelli. They're literally like look at this one. The rapist maker. Without him, none of them would be here. They are all victims of this master, this grand master who made them do it. When we all know in reality, rape is a crime of opportunity. And all of these men had the opportunity, and all of these men took it. Very few showed up and were like, whoa, this is crazy. She's literally drugged and left. And the ones who didn't call the police. The way they will see themselves as a victim, even when they're caught on camera, he made me do it. This is what they always do. That's why I talk about it all the time. This passive language of like, that thing that happened rather than that thing I did. The accused themselves sometimes overplay their part. Like this one dude, he says he was a terrified sheep in the room. Dominique Pelicot was all red. He's a monster man and he made me do it. The liberal nurse cries in court. We will all remember Didier, who strings together dirty joke during his testimony. I have nothing left. My thing is hanging down there, he says, describing the lack of enrichment due to removal of his bladder following cancer. In another version, he says, I have Dumbo ears, but not my trunk. This dude literally, like, the way these men were so insulted, and the way they just had all these different tactics to avoid any responsibility of the thing that they did. Remember Thierry, accused who wants to create, oh my God, y'all. I talked about this in the video, a breakdown. I haven't finished it yet. He wanted to create an association to preach the good word about consent in the Libertine Club. That is his new mission in life. He wants to keep doing the Libertine world because, of course, he's never going to stop. Like, just hooking up all the time to avoid himself. But he wants to use this experience to do good. He wants to, like, this is so ridiculous. God. Or the rhetorical question that's specific to Jean-Marc, 74-year-old, who's the oldest of the 51. He says, what trucker has not been to see a prostitute? Like, duh. Then there was Mohammed, who is 70 years old, who said he did not get any pleasure from the grapes that he inflicted. Because, schmegs without love is like a flower without scent. Before, he stated that tinnitus prevented him from hearing the victim's snore. Okay. Faced with these statements, Gisele often remains stoic. Nevertheless, she regularly rolls her eyes to the sky, shaking her head no. Tears sometimes flow down her cheeks. Not enough, though, in the eyes of the defense. Nadia, the woman who makes the videos on Instagram, wake me up before you, and literally mocking Gisele. One of the things that this awful, awful woman did was say that, that Gisele didn't cry enough. Did it really happen if you didn't cry? You're not crying. She wrongly accuses her of having cried only once when her ex-husband's childhood was mentioned. Proof that she was still under his influence today. Incroyable. Gisele only leaves the courtroom twice. First at the end of October, exasperated by the nonchalance of the accused. Then at the beginning of December, when the remarks of another defense lawyer crushed her to her limit. This lawyer was showing a video and saying, like, see, she moves her pelvis to position herself. She wasn't asleep. If Gisele rarely shows her anger, feminists take care of her. Around the court, there is purple smoke bombs. They do that all over France, but they like put letters all over that spell out things. So they spelled out sayings, like some of the quotes from the courtroom, like 20 years for each. There are countless collages on the walls all over, which remain there for weeks. No matter her legacy, it does not really lie there. Gisele's rather on the tenacity, which by, I don't know what this word means, who wanted a public trial, facing the press, who came from all over the world to attend the verdict. She addresses the unrecognized victims on Thursday. Said we all have the same. To not overwhelm you, I may actually do one separate video of how she's changed throughout this trial, from being, just kind of a participant to really in real time dropping what seems to be like dropping her own shame, like changing this shame to the other side physically in real time. But I don't want to make this too long, so I just want to go over that one dude just so you can get an idea of what the kinds of stories these reporters, because this was her report, what they had to sit through. So before I get into that guy that I'm going to talk about in the very, watching the women respond to this, the partners of the accused, having to listen to them cry and scream as their sentences are being announced. Several exclamations, 9 years, damn it, 9 years. Screaming, 9 years. All these women are coming to support these men. Some of them are actually financially dependent on them. So it makes sense why they're there. Others aren't. But it's the women who are showing up, supporting them, testifying for them, and who will take care of them while they're in jail, probably. We'll go visit, maybe send them. I don't know how the system works here, but I know in the U.S. it is usually women who are sending their loved ones money. On the day of the hearing where they announced the verdict, that 180 media were present. Some got there at 5 a.m. 180 were accredited to cover the event, including 85 foreigners and a total of 350 journalists. So there's a lot of journalists there who are not accredited and who are not accredited in France because they have very strong regulations around them. Outside the courthouse, there was women, shouting, hope you're not gonna blend. Their cries, when the men entered, there was like a lot of women outside and people, not just women, being like, you're Raymond, you're Raymond. Activists handed them oranges for their stay in prison. One of the defense lawyers was literally yelling at them, like this stuff. Calls them hysterical, furious, blah, blah, blah. They said that this trial got more coverage than it would have, literally Macron had been there. Gisele's always applauded like a rock star. This was a circus. I can't imagine being there, having to deal with all this, then also having to deal with all the people there and fighting for a seat to cover this horrifying story. So now I'm finally going to end on the stuff that one of the guys was doing. Just to make a broader point that most of these men are not just, they are like every man. And at the same time, a lot of them are doing this, have been doing this to their partners or to women on website for a while. So none of this even this crime of opportunity It was a crime of opportunity for some of them, but there's always opportunities. Men create opportunities to harm women. And let's just look at this one example. And the main reason why I want to talk about this is if we go back to when this case first started, if y'all remember, anyone who's been here for a while, I made that video about a man to me at the river. And that's happened to me so many times in my life, especially in my childhood, and in the home. And what I realized when I saw the profiles of these men is that a lot of these men, including Dominique Pelicot, are out there doing this to other women. And why we need to take revenge porn seriously, why we need to take the putting it under someone's skirt, what men are doing to strangers is often not nearly as much as what they're doing to the women they love in their home. But when they're doing it to strangers, they're like taking chances. So that man who did that to me, I would be willing to bet he is harming someone in his home. Maybe his girlfriend, his wife, maybe he's not straight. Maybe he is harming a child in his home. Maybe he is harming a partner or whatever. I don't know. But this stuff just never happens. Some of them have a long history of it. And if we paid more attention to these small, minor crimes, Dominique Pelicot would have come down a long time ago. Gisele forgave him for putting it under the skirt. It wasn't until she went and saw what he had done to her that she was like, oh my God. We need to come out of our own delusion about what these smaller crimes actually mean, because she had no idea that what he was doing to a stranger in the supermarket was just the tip of the iceberg of what he was doing to her. And these women's testimonies prove all that. I know a lot of women went to Cape for these men, but I wouldn't be surprised if these very women were stuck in the denial of, and maybe these men aren't harming, because that is absolutely a possibility, but they're probably harming someone they know. This man basically ruined the life of many women. They took to the stand one after the other on Monday, November 4th, to tell that Cedric, this is one guy, 51, made them live through. In public, he was funny, kind, but very dark in private. This one person, she was 36-year-old woman, had been with him from 2013, so for 5 years. And she said that he was always unfaithful, probably because of a addiction, which, again, I don't believe that. That does, there's no proof that actually exists. Look at this. Before entering the courtroom, she had expressed the wish to testify in camera for fear of reprisal, an unprecedented request for a witness since the start of the trial. If they translated this right, I'm guessing she was like, hey, I want everyone to know what I look like in case I get harmed after this, because I want you to know exactly, you know what I mean? Because most of the women and the defendants, who are all guilty now, didn't want their face shown. So just one of the women explained several years of the sexual harassment. He posted photos of her on the internet. Some were intimate, others were more basic professional photos, holiday photos. He posted my ID, my phone number, my address, my profession. She had to change jobs because of this man. I think this is a different woman. I can't keep up. Said it took months to understand why she had been targeted. Said a person who knows someone warns one of my relatives. I was very stunned, very shocked. It took me a while to realize how much I had been betrayed. Then she had a burnout and fairly serious depression 2 years later. So basically, she only found out about all her photos being blasted on the internet because a friend told a relative of hers, like, hey, you know she's all over the internet? Her story echoes Gisele's, who lived for decades with the man she described as a great guy. Marion has every reason to believe that she could have suffered the same fate as Gisele, because while searching through Cedric's cell phone, she came across exchanges with Dominique in which her partner wrote, I dream that she gets when she gets home. It's a sentence that's been going around in my head ever since. And this stunned the courtroom. So when questioned, he admitted that he had sent photos of her to Dominique and even acknowledged that the Dominique had given him a vial containing the same drug that he gave to Gisele so that he could administer so that he could give it to her too. The man also showed Dominique where his partner lived and arranged for him to meet her on a bridge during a walk. Cedric claims to have never crossed the line and have returned right He returned the drugs to Dominique. Okay, however, the mystery remains. She woke up unconscious outside one evening, and reports deploring that no investigation was opened at the time. My memory has not come back to me. I have been living with this for 6 years. So then there was also Elodie and Elisa. Apparently there were pictures of them too. These photos were posted as part of online ads, presenting them as web whores, with their home address, their workplace, and their telephone number. Y'all, I'm telling you, what men are doing on the internet while they're in our homes, sometimes laying right next to us, is bonkers. In Alyssa's case, Cedric posted videos of them doing it on porn site. I received messages on social networks. People told me, you're beautiful, you're nice, and I didn't understand. She had no idea why people were like reaching out to her saying this stuff. Then a gentleman contacted me saying that a huge number of photos were circulating on the internet. That's when I saw that I was being posted on porn sites and on Coco, the one that this dude met, Dominique. I'm still being posted today. So I don't know what the French laws are. You know, I know that this is illegal in most U.S. or many U.S. states. I don't know if it's federal yet, but I know in California was, because I reported my ex for this because he used a photo he took of me sleeping of my sorry, I still call it that, my and used it as his profile photo on Twitter. And so I reported him for revenge porn, and his profile was, of course he didn't have any consequences. Unknowingly, both women were in contact with Cedric at the same time. So he's doing this to women at the same time. The man led a double life for a year. We were only together on weekends. The other days, he was with his other partner, who testifies in a wheelchair, suffering from multiple sclerosis. She thought she had met the man of her life, who had proposed to her. Oh my God, he proposed to her. This was some time before he was accused and arrested. When asked if she had been wronged by Cedric, she talks about how she has to take medicine for her sclerosis. When her muscles hurt too much, then they relaxed me. I don't think he did what you're implying, but I'm not sure. And they asked, do you have doubts? Mm-hmm. And as for Alyssa, she said her daily life with this dude was tinged with violence and humiliation. She reports unacceptable demand. Y'all, oh my God, I forgot about this. When asked to elaborate, she said, Schmeg's work. I did it, but I regret it enormously. She said, bursting into tears. Imagine the reporters watching these people tell their stories, the emotions with it, and like, oh God, I don't know how they sat through all this. I mean, I don't know how all the women lived through all this, but imagine this is your job. Imagine this is your job. This is kind of my job, but at least I can kind of choose what I talk about, and I guess I'm a masochist or whatever. I care enough to do it and whatever for this. She said she accepted a paid relationship with another man at the request of Cedric. He had so many photos of me, videos. I was afraid he would show them to someone. See? This is how he's using it for blackmail. So when asked why never introduced to her children, because he admitted he liked children. Sorry, teenagers. Her testimony takes another. Were you aware of the child porn images on his computer? Not at all. Then they talk about this disturbing breakup letter found by Elodie on Cedric's windshield. And the woman's letter said she compares the man 16 years older than her daddy, whom she never knew. I had a lot of questions, especially when you confessed to me that you liked And worst of all is when you told me that you liked girls, when you talked to me about my daughter and my son. Ugh. Again, I've already made most of this video, but I'm afraid y'all can't handle it. And I don't know. I feel like I just made it and just throw it away. This trial is about more than anything. And I think I need to make the video because when the psychologist interviewed, they found out that he had been raped several times by an uncle as a teenager and all this stuff. Ugh. She said, the more time passed, the more you showed me your perverse side. She said in the letter, I agreed to myself for the fear of losing my dad. Even if you push me to do all this, you still remain a beautiful, oh God, you'll forever remain my dad. Oh my God, y'all. Names were changed for anonymity. Y'all, when I tell you this Kate, oh my God. I need to make a whole other video about how it is not, this is an entire system. This is not just men. This is and I speak from experience here, that until we admit all the things that we went through and what the men that we love and were loved by, what all they did to us and other people, until we can face our own truth, we are enabling men, we are caping for men, we are testifying for men. Like our denial, and it makes sense. It makes sense. But the people who have caused the most harm in my life were the women who, out of fear of seeing what happened to me, and possibly maybe even what happened to them, maybe as a child too, caused just as much harm. Continue to cause just as much harm as the people who did it. But one person in particular. And when I think back on all the biggest mistakes I've made is when I'm in my own delusion, and when I'm in my own, especially with, when I'm in that story and in that dynamic, I am a part of a system of violence that's causing harm. And children and women are harmed the most. All of these men who were, not all of them, most of these men who were out there doing that were part of a bigger cycle of violence with enablers and people doing this, no, and all of this stuff. It is such a sick and twisted dynamic. It's never just about one person. Anyway, I'm sorry. This is I'm sorry. All of this stuff is happening at the same time. I get back from spending time with my family and it's like, oh my God, the trial of the century. It wraps up. So I've got all these videos to make, and then this Justin Baldoni and all this crap, y'all. I don't know if I have. Plus, I wanted to do at least one Christmas review, so I'm sorry. I'm doing my best here. I'm exhausted from this last trip that was actually very hard for different reasons, and I've talked about it on Patreon, but I'm not really ready to talk about it publicly yet. Anyway, this is a hard time of year for people also. If the news wasn't already so crazy, and like the fear of what's coming and all of that stuff, this is a hard time of year. Every Christmas has always been hard for me because it's like, it reminds me of a time of year, one of the worst things that have ever happened to me. So I'm sure I'm not alone with that, death, grief, whatever. So all these news stories, with it all happening right, it's challenging. I hope you're taking care of yourself, y'all. I'm doing what I can, but I don't know if I'll be able to do all the content that people have been asking me to do. I'm doing what I can. Anyway, thank you for supporting my work. Thank you, especially if you're on Patreon. And even if you can't afford a tier, that's how you find me. That's how you stay in contact with me, because you get notifications from me and my work if you forget I exist, because the algorithm just decides to do that one day. Anyway, thank you for being here. And please support local journalists and independent journalists like myself, because without, and especially those journalists who are in those rooms every day giving us this story, for all of us to face truths that are very, very hard to see, but nothing's going to change until we do. Anyway, okay, I'm going to try to do a comment song, but it may not be, I don't know. This is such a hard topic. Okay, dog break. Okay, et voila. Okay, this is the comment song from Strasbourg. With this ridiculous gaudy stuff. In Strasbourg, yes, that's a teddy bear house. And that's a wall, chestnuts walls, roasting on an open fire train. And lots of other cheesy stuff that I'm gonna share on my Patreon. This is not even a song. I'm sorry, it's random and not a tune. Teddy bear house. That video's coming. Maybe tomorrow on Patreon. Anyway, I just can't leave y'all hanging with such a tragic story. So here's a stupid photo of me as a gingerbread man, woman, whatever. Anyway, let me know if you heard the gingerbread comment song. Take care of yourselves.